Good morning, everyone. How are you today? I'm Monica. I'm a VP Marketing at Alasco, and I'm very happy to welcome you today to our next AI in Real Estate Masterclass. This time today, talking about how AI is changing development workflows. Very happy to have you all here. So, just a short intro for our session. This is a series of webinars, and it's for you if you are a property or project developer, investment manager, or owner or asset or property manager. The goals of these sessions are to give you very clear use cases and actionable takeaways so that you can actually start deploying AI first personal level, then at the team level, and finally at the company level. This is the fourth or fifth webinar in the series. All the previous ones are already available on demand on YouTube, so please check it out. And if not, if you cannot find the link, I'll be sure to send it following this webinar. Today's session, we'll get to that in a second, and then we have another exciting session coming up later in March around change management, because let's not forget, technology is good, is nice, but often the bottleneck to adoption is about how you present the case to the people, how you bring along, how you upskill them. So that session is going to be about change management. Well, let's get to today's session. I'm very pleased to introduce you to our wonderful guest, Benedict Marzahn. He is our co-CEO at Alasco, and Evan Shapiro, CEO and founder at DataLine Labs. We'll give you guys the opportunity to introduce yourself in a minute. First, a quick overview of Alasco. We're a software platform, a financial management platform for new development and retrofits. We are present in Europe in over 20 countries, and by now I think we have over 5,000 projects running on Alasco, both development, deep renovations, and repositionings. And typically we work with some of the largest investment managers, but also development companies across Europe. So that's it about us. I'll keep it short and sweet. So now, to kickstart the discussion, I would like to start with something that we've seen on the market very recently as of February. You've probably heard, and here I need your help, Benedict and Evan, to share how you view these things that are happening on the market. On the one side, we know that at least in Germany and the UK, we are structurally constrained in terms of new buildings, right? Nobody's building a lot. We don't have affordable housing. Capital is very cautious. Risks are under scrutiny. So execution is under scrutiny. So the market, we keep talking about this cautious optimism, but in reality, the market is still very tight. And at the same time, in, I think, February 3rd, on the software side of things, we saw a 300 billion capitalization loss when Claude actually launched their Opus 4.6 model. And it seems from where we're standing and from where we're talking to business partners and customers that the software marketing is being repriced because the AI age and the LLMs are fundamentally moving value away from a structured database with a user interface where the user still manually has to click and perform the work towards data and towards outcomes. So in this context, putting the two together, if on the building side, on the construction market, things are still constrained, and at the same time, AI is totally rethinking the value chains along the development flows. How do you see this? Have you seen this in your market? How do you think value will migrate and real estate developers will approach this new challenge? Over to you.
Cool. Maybe, Evan, I could start maybe from a more incumbent perspective, and then hand over to you as you're I would say the younger and more disruptive company. So basically, Alasco started as a SaaS company. So we are taking a look at the market, what's happening there, and also at the technology very cautiously. So it's very interesting to see that the power of the disruption that is happening in the segment right now. So it's I'm doing digital business for over 15 years, and I've never seen such an innovation wave than what's happening at the moment. So coming to SaaS, what's the reason why basically the stock also reacted very heavily on the open claw publishment was that the barrier to produce software on your own is much more lower than it was before. So like the mode of a company offers standardized software was pretty deep. Because the cost of producing such a software for a vertical company were simply too high. So that's the reason why the business of SaaS existed. And now the cost of producing software are decreasing. So that gives every company out there or every individual out there much more chances to produce it by yourself. I think we all seen that. Most of us have own agents working on our computers, basically doing activities that we outsourced to people or to software before. So I think that's one of the reasons why the SaaS environment is under pressure, and why people still have questions, are more passive to invest into SaaS companies, because they want to see what's happening with them. What my personal perspective on this transformation here is that from the huge amount of software companies over there, I think a lot of them will be able to transform into the age of AI, and software will not disappear from one moment to the other, but of course it will look different in 4 to 5 years. But on the other side, it's a very disruptive age, and that also means that legacy companies or companies that are simply building on a too traditional tech stack, they will not able to transform into the age of AI. So I think from a macro perspective, these are my thoughts here. And over to you, Evan. I'm super interested how you see the current development.
Yeah, really good points. I guess there's like two halves of this conversation, because half is like SaaS and AI in the rest of the world, and then SaaS and AI in real estate. Because real estate is a totally different sector. It operates at a much slower pace, large transactions, but slow to make decisions, slow to get the data, slow to build. There's typically not, and then I'm talking about large companies, typically innovation is quite slow as well, which means that real estate as a sector has typically been a laggard compared to traditional finance and some other sectors. So I think that's like first like a distinguishing point to make. In terms of the SaaS model, yeah, I think that within real estate companies, the way that they buy SaaS will change. Like I think we're moving away from the seats model of saying, okay, well, or buildings model, and potentially it's going to be, well, how many queries are you searching, or how much value are you getting from your software. So I think that's kind of the biggest change within SaaS, and I think why we saw 300 billion evaporated, because revenue models are changing and value is changing across the board. Within real estate, I think it's a really exciting time, because what I've said at the beginning of this intro is that real estate has been a laggard. I think AI offers the opportunity to totally transform how decisions are made, from a relatively slow and arduous process trying to piece together bits of data points to, okay, we can make decisions much quicker because we know where the data is. We've got analytical tools that we didn't have at our disposal, or before had to rely on massive data teams. I think the way that in real estate investment decisions will end up getting made will totally change, and therefore you get a lot of speed and therefore much more value.
Thank you. I love your viewpoints and how real estate has been a laggard, but now it has the opportunity to jump a couple of stages and actually be on par with the other industries. So coming back to our topic today in development, one of the things that we're super proud at Alasco, and that kind of we think covers a gap in the market, and Benedict, I will give you the opportunity to present it in a minute, is obviously we deal with financial data. And the thing that we notice in the market is that very often, even with software, with structured data, financial data is never real time. There's a huge gap between, say, when you approve an invoice and between you pay it and then when the reporting comes back and you're actually looking at actuals versus budget. In larger companies, it's not unusual to take 2 to 4 weeks. And this kind of latency and gap very often eats into your margin, because by then it's too late to make any decision. You've burned through your contingencies. So this is a gap we're proudly working towards. And now I'm giving the presentation over to you, Bene, if you want to share your screen.
Sure, I will. Cool. Thank you so much, Monica. Maybe because I didn't introduce myself so far, so cool to everyone. I'm Benedict. I'm co-CEO of Alasco. I'm responsible, among others, for the product department. So I'm really having really driving the transformation from a pure software company to a AI first company. Super interesting, but also challenging, right? But it's a lot of fun, and you don't get the chances so often that you really can disrupt an industry. And my background is pure digital. I'm working in the digital business for 15 years. I started in ad technology back in the 2010s. We sold a company to a big, sold a startup to a big media company, and then I went from e-commerce to B2B, now into the age of AI. So personal, very, very cool journey to see digital business evolving over time. Coming back to AI and also what we see out there when it comes to the financial twin, and I really liked, Evan, how you were describing the value of AI. It's on the one side, it's efficiency in terms of you can do things much faster. I mean, ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude basically helps us doing our research much more efficient. But on the other side, it helps us to decide better. And I think these two things of the medal we try to incorporate into our product. And I can just share some things how we work, and then also make the product more tangible in the next few minutes. So what we see is also looking at Alasco, what's super important is that data is basically the foundation of everything. So if you don't have structured data, and you can make unstructured data structured, but you need a data pool, a good data pool, a structured data pool to really put AI functionalities, workflows, and all of that on top of it. Without that, basically, everything else is not working well, because you all know this term shit in, shit out. And typically that really also is reflected on the data part as well. So that's, I think, is the crucial part, that this is the foundation. And of course, with a software like Alasco, you have that foundation. We are modern, have a modern tech stack, and this also enables us ourselves to really transform into the age of AI. And then on this, with the basis of the data foundation, we are now able to really put some put agentic solutions, but also LLM solutions on top of this database. And I'll show you in a sec how a development appraisal or an AI assistant looks at Alasco. But based on that data foundation, we enable AI-based services like agents, other data enrichments or LLMs to work on that database. So you see basically how this sums up from bottom to top. And of course, this all changes over time. So if you think about AI back in Q4 25, which from now on still feels like it's been an age, Everything has changed a lot. Many new LLMs have come up, from Gemini, who was like celebrated as the best model. And now it seems like Claude is having an advantage, and also OpenClaw is something that we haven't seen before. So the innovation cycle is really hard to follow. But you need a partner who is able to follow all these technology trends, and also be able to adapt to all of these things. But these are the three levers that we work on: having a good foundation, putting AI agents, AI services on top. But still, it's about like continuously innovating in this segment, and it's not possible to make a year plan. Actually, you have to plan from 1 month to another, because it's going so fast. And I heard a quote from Silicon Valley. In product and software, you speak of product market fit, and so the term is PMF. And I heard that people now speak of product month fit, because it changes so fast. So this is what we see out there. Like now, making that more tangible, and just like starting what Alasco basically does. For those who don't know us yet, we're doing financial management and ESG management, and offer that as software or as AI-based agents for the real estate industry. Typically, we serve project developers and also asset managers. So we cover the whole life cycle of a building, from the first development appraisal to the final exit of the building. And also when it comes to ESG management, we cover the life cycle of a building, enabling you as a customer to derive the right ecological but also economical measures. So this is like what Alasco basically does. And I just want to like pinpoint to three things that how we started to get into that AI segment, and also use AI as an efficiency driver for our customers. So what typically happens in Alasco is that all the documents, all the context that you have, it can be contracts, invoices, and all that stuff, are extracted automatically. So you just like drag and drop documents into Alasco. We extract the context, put it into our database, and from that workflows happen. And also agentic solutions are set on top of it. But that's basically the foundation, how we started 2 years ago, extracting all the information from documents. And I think we all know that AI is pretty good at that. What we did then back in 25 is that we launched the AI assistant. Also, I'll show you in a sec how this works. But basically, you can now chat with Alasco and ask questions. What are the current performance drivers of my projects? Where I'm on track, where I'm off track, where should I take a look at it? Where do I have financial risks? So like all that stuff where you in the past maybe asking let's say an assistant to like deep dive on the data, this is now possible with our AI assistant. So I heard customers stating that before a board meeting, they don't go and take a look at like reports from their assistant, but rather they chat with Alasco and get the information by themselves very quickly. So it's a different way of interacting with the software, and I think it's just the beginning, but it's such an efficiency driver, and also it helps you deriving decisions very fast. Third topic that what we are now starting in the beginning of this year are agentic solutions. So in this case, we're talking about an invoice verification. So it's a formal invoice verification, and then an agent basically does what a human did before. So they check the parameters of an invoice. Do you have a tax ID? Do you have a recipient for the invoice? Is all the formal notes that are related to an invoice, are they fulfilled or not? And the review is done by the agent, and we have a human in the loop double checking it. But basically, these are the first agentic applications that we now have in the software. And also, what we did in the beginning of this year, and I also want to make that tangible, we started to really go into the first phase of a real estate project, and we developed our first AI first feature, the developer appraisal. For those who are not so familiar with what a developer appraisal is, it basically is the economic evaluation of a project. So before you start building, you typically calculate the efficiency and the economic validity of a project, and you do that you calculate costs, revenues, but also the financing conditions. And that's the starting point where you go to the bank and ask, hey, I have a nice project with these KPIs, which you support it from a financing perspective. And this is a pure AI first feature, and we have never seen so much interest from the market than on this feature so far. So it basically is a feature that helps you like giving an overview of all the business opportunities that you're focusing on. We offer benchmarking. We give you the chance to really get a calculation within a few minutes. And also from that, if the bank approves the project, you can transfer it into the execution. So it's a starting point of the whole value chain where you set up a financial digital twin, I would say, from the very beginning. And this is your starting point for all the calculations that you do afterwards, and also the starting point for all the controlling you do afterwards, because this is the state, so this is also the state where you manage. And just a very like works. Here you have an overview of all your projects that you currently take a look at. You see it on the map, and from that you can also jump into opportunities that you want to have a deeper dive on. So here you see that this is the magic calculation of such a project. Also here we offer much flexibility. You can generate all your individual calculations by yourself. And it's not only that you can use our standard templates, but with a drag and drop, you can also upload your own models. So that's I think a big differentiation to the past. Now setting up your own financial model, just like with a drag and drop, is something that has changed, and which brings a lot of efficiency, but also individualization to this software. From that, if you model it, you can also see how the versions like transform over past, and also what's the current version is something. If you take a look at your Excel spreadsheet, probably it's hard to answer what's the current version, but from here you see it as an overview. You can also do some simulations on the sensitivity of different kind of parameters, so you can play around with different parameters, and you see the effect on margin, profit, and all that stuff. And at the end, what's really resonates with our customers is that from now on, if you have that model in Alasco, you just like drag and drop an expose, a document. All data is extracted from the model, and it's the first calculation is basically done within a few seconds. And that's a huge increase in terms of speed. And we had a chat with a customer yesterday, and he said with Alasco, with that feature, he's now able to really identify 100% of his opportunities that he has on his table. In the past, he tried to already find out what on which 10% he should focus on, but now he can really analyze all of this 100% of these opportunities that are sent to him. So I think that's very cool to see also from a project development perspective, that this helps people making business. So that's it on the development appraisal, and maybe just like getting also a view on Alasco. I told you about the assistant, what we have in the system, and this is how Alasco looks from the inside. And on the right side, you see the AI assistant, and this assistant can help me as a decision maker to really make a deep dive on all of my projects. So think of like 10 real estate projects that you run in parallel, and I have a board meeting Monday morning, 11 a.m. And of course, I want to get an indication, what is the project with the highest budget deviation? And now Alasco runs. I asked that question to the AI assistants. Now it's preparing the answer, and I see also first risk analysis, what's happening here. So I see the Schwabinger Höfe, where the budget deviation is the highest compared to my initial planning, and I also can do follow up tasks like what are the deviations and the risk in particular. And now the AI starts thinking and gives me also a more detailed view on the reasoning of why this budget deviation is happening. So this is a different interaction with the tool. It's cool to see that also working for real estate. But I think this is just the beginning, and we see Alasco as a front runner when it comes to the transformation of a typical SaaS solution to a AI first solution. I hope it helped you to get a better understanding of how we work and also how we think of the first modules that are really AI first. And I'm looking forward to get back or hand over to you, Monica, and probably also giving Evan the chance to show his perspective.
Thank you, Benedict. Yeah, I just want to double click on something because we're talking earlier about protecting your margin and how execution makes the whole difference now. With this development appraisal tool that we now have, it's totally feasible to start with from early feasibility, moving it through appraisal, and then moving it to the project budget and actually executing on it. So by making sure the data is aligned and constantly updated, this is how we actually give you, a project manager or a controller, the tools to steer your project. So I think this unlocks a lot of opportunity versus what we were able to do so far.
Absolutely.
And we are also lucky in a way because we do have a lot of structured data from past projects, which makes this thing a little bit more easier. However, now jumping over to you, Evan, I know that DataLines deals with unstructured data, so making sense out of chaos, if I may say it. So over to you. Maybe you tell us a little bit about you, your company, and then let's see it in action.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Benedict and Monica. Yeah, really interesting demo. Cool. I'm Evan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DataLine Labs. My background is I started off in finance and was at a big investment bank, and then went to private equity funds, and then went to a startup. And what I realized along my journey was that there were data issues pretty much at the likes of HSBC, some of the biggest companies in the world, and a 30-person startup, and they're all very similar problems. So we started DataLine Labs to kind of solve some of those problems and make data searchable, queryable, and get those insights really quickly from your data. And that's what I'm going to show you today. In terms of AI, this is an AI first platform, relatively new to the market. The big thing with AI, and I guess you've all used ChatGPT or potentially Claude, the biggest thing with getting the best results from your AI is context and memory. Those are the biggest things. So if you can give as much context as possible to your data, and from a company level perspective, from a personal level perspective, from a project level perspective, you'll get way better answers from your AI when actually querying it. So we've built a platform that sits across companies' data from all sorts of data. We create the contextual layer, we create the memory layer, and also generate reports and etc. from that. So I'll share my screen and I'll show it to you in action. Cool. So our platform is called Mira. As you can see, it looks quite similar to a normal chat interface, but there's a lot happening behind the hood, which is quite smart. So I'll show you what that looks like. So first of all, I loaded in some data which I thought would complement some of the Alasco data. So this is all construction related data. So we've got material prices, costs, some labor costs, risk register, projects. What we do is we take the dump of all the data, the AI categorizes it, so it creates what we call domains. So that helps the AI understand this is what the data is for. And then behind the scenes, we create the context. So we say, this is all happening automatically. It says, this is what the data is for. For each column, we say, this is what you should expect. This is our typical ID structure. Let's say this is the rate in pounds per hour. But if you just had a column that said price and didn't say, you can go in and say, well, actually, some of these are in euros or multi-currencies, and you'd be able to go in and edit them. It's also understanding we're sampling the data and understanding the relationships between which columns match to other columns, so you can get really deep insights. So just before this call, I did this chat. So I said, which of my projects are buying structural steel at market rates, and what is my total exposure if price rises 10%? So it's gone into the data, it's picked out only the data sets which matter to this calculation. It's created a committed number of projects, committed actual spend, and then the risk profile. So which are like the risks that I should be most interested in. What is the project by buying market? Broader risks to note, and then a summary. And then it created these visualizations here. So within these as well, I can go in and you can see the data and you can export the data if you want to see it in your own Excel. But in this case, I said, okay, this is great. Can you create a risk report for me? So we then look at the data. We see, is there any other information that we'd want to bring into a risk report? And then it created this portfolio risk report. So this is totally structured document that you could send internally with an executive summary, portfolio risk overview. This is all linked to the dashboard, so anything that changes in the dashboard also changes in the report, and you can see the kind of the detail that we get into here. Yeah, I sometimes get questions of like, well, how is this different from your chat GPT? I was speaking to a hedge fund manager the other day, and I did the exact same queries, chat GPT and Mira, and chat GPT didn't get into this level of detail. So the biggest difference between AIs that are built around the models is that you can control exactly what data the models see. Whereas if you're just looking at if you're, let's say, drag and dropping your data into ChatGPT, it's looking at everything. The more it looks at, the more likely it is to hallucinate. So the way of, I guess, limiting that risk is to only feed it information which is relevant. And we do that through something called SQL queries. Cool. So I was going to show a live demo as well, just so you can see it in action. Save this. Let's say something like, say based on this data, what would I want to know as a project manager? Cool, so you'll be able to see the thinking here. So first of all, we're looking at all of the data it's got access to, so that's everything in data management. Like I said, we don't want to ever feed the AI everything. So what we're doing is working out which are the data sets which meet the query. Once the results are found, for I guess the more technical people on this call, we're creating the SQL queries. So this is something like a typical data science team would do, and maybe take them quite a long time to pull the data. So like if you go to your data science team and say, how did we do this quarter? They may say, okay, well, I need to go into the database and pull that information. This is all doing it automatically to bring back the information you need. So you can see the level of detail that we've got here. Okay, so it's like, which one do you want to go to? So as a project manager, these are probably the high level points I want to go into. We've kind of done risk exposure, so let's do materials and procurement. So you can dive in deeper. It's always fun doing live demos, as you know, Benedict.
Yeah, I was already narrowing down on very high risk planning applications. I know that's a big sore point.
Yeah, totally. So now we've gone back into it. So we're looking at the materials and procurements. It's creating any graphs that it thinks are most interesting because it's coming from the perspective of a project manager. So we've got budget versus committed spend. So this is probably a really interesting chart for yeah, a lot of the developers. Committed spend by price and status. It looks like it might produce a few more, maybe not. This is the report. Cool, so loads of detail. And then let's say, create a report of this. Yeah, so like something in real estate, which probably would have taken, I don't know, weeks to maybe do before, can be done in minutes. And then we say where all the materials, the sources come back. So like the biggest thing also with AI is you want to be able to check where the data is coming from. Is it accurate? So we can say, okay, well, this is the source where it's from. You can go into here and see the data itself. For more technical people, you can actually read the SQL and change this, or you can edit the chart as well. So say you wanted a pie chart instead of a bar chart or something like that.
May I ask you a question in
Yeah.
between?
Mm.
Because you said,
Please.
obviously, we know real estate is more conservative and trust plays a very big role in that. How do you, and also coming back to how AI are shifting the value curve from people actually doing the work, now it seems to me this is going towards control, governance, checking the data. How do you make sure it's actually true? And how do
Yeah.
people trust it? And I would
Yeah.
open the stage also to you, Benedict, because you also have lots of experience in the space.
Yeah, totally agree. It's not, that's just not just real estate, that's every industry.
Of course.
And I think that there's also been like a lot of talk about, well, is the workforce going to be reduced and how's AI going to impact that? And I think to your point, trust matters a lot more and accountability matters a lot more. So you're still going to have people who may be running these AIs who are accountable for them and also need to trust them. So there are going to be people who are going to be accountable for their AI, so therefore they need to know the steps that go through. So what we do is we say exactly where the data comes from. We've got an audit trail that says this is the steps that AI has done to get to its answer, and then the human can then go in and validate whether that's correct. And in some instances, like the human knows the data really well, so they'll be able to say, okay, well, actually, it's missed this data point, or it's missed that data point, or actually it's spot on. And if it's missed it, it can say, okay, well, can you also pull from this? If it's spot on, cool. And it's one of those things like the first time you use it, you're never going to trust it as much as the 100th time you use it. Like you kind of have to really build trust in these systems, and finding the ones which are most trustworthy. But yeah, that's my take. But yeah, just to finalize my demo, yeah, here's the report that is created, and yeah, you can then export this Word document or PDF. But yeah, really quick way of connecting your data systems, doing your research, creating your visualizations, and reporting.
Cool. Evan, very cool solution. And I think to double on what you said, I think trust is super important in terms of these agents basically supporting you in taking decisions. So you must trust in the data and also the recommendations before you really do that action, because this is at the end, it should be a human decision. The recommendation should be done by the agent, so you get to that point much faster. But at the end, you have to trust the database and also the underlying processes that came up with that recommendation. And I think that's starting with how you get into the demo. This is also the reason why you need like vertical solutions. You need like companies or solutions really focused on, in this case, real estate or manufacturing, automotive, and all that stuff, because a general solution will not be able to cover all these specifics. And I would even say real estate is super broad, so you will you probably need a player in construction. You need probably a player in facility management. So there will be specialists, because the domain specific knowledge must be incorporated into all these models and agents. And this will also gain that trust that everyone needs on that data.
Thank you. I guess trust is a big adoption hurdle in using these AI platforms. From your experience and talking to a lot of prospects and customers, besides trust, where do you see the barriers moving today?
Benedict, do you want to start, or do you want
Oh, go
me to
ahead.
start? Okay. I think there's a few places other than trust, especially because it's moving very quickly. I think some companies are struggling to adopt because they don't know where to start. So there are so many different solutions. Every company, like Benedict's saying, like basically has to become an AI company, because if you don't, you will fail. And therefore, the market is flooded with AI solutions. So I think there's a potential for, I guess, buying paralysis, and I think that's where some companies are really struggling, because they're like, well, which is the best solution for my company and my use case? So that's something that we're seeing. Trust is another one, and like, I guess, their own proprietary data. Like, they don't want solutions that are just going to be generic. Like, if you send your data just to a chat GPT, you're going to get a generic answer. But companies want their AI to give them an edge. So how can AI companies and SaaS companies create that edge for the businesses that aren't just generic, using the generic LLMs? So those are, I think, the two that we see most in the market.
I would even start one step further, Evan, when I take a look at all the conversations that I have, and we're happy to have more than 400 customers, B2B customers on Alasco. I see that we are, as a company, a front runner, and we need to also help our customers to see and to like interpret what's happening out there. So I would not say like hand holding, but it goes in that direction. But you know, this is of course our customers deal with real estate objects, and this is their primary business. And now AI and all these dynamics, they're basically overtaking all of them. And so now we have to really bring more clarity into the noise, and really give orientation, what needs to be done first, what needs to be done second. Don't panic. It's a black box for most of them, but like the orientation we give in our workshops, I think helps a lot of players out there to really feel good and to know what to do first, what to do next. And I think this is how we also educate the industry.
Yeah,
Totally.
totally with you, Benedict. So I guess this opens the door to some sort of co-creation with a customer. So not, okay, this is the software, take it or leave it, but actually let's get deep into your workflows and see where it makes sense, where it doesn't make sense yet.
Yeah, I also think, just on that point, it's especially for larger companies, their appetite for risk on onboarding new tech. I think typically, like when you're onboarding a SaaS platform, you want the SaaS platform to do exactly what it's doing, and you want it to be a success. And it goes through very clear gateways of, this is how we're going to make you a success. But with AI solutions, most companies, I guess, are relatively new, especially the more disruptive ones. And it's also a new technology. Like, if you think about where we are in the life cycle of AI, we're right. I heard someone say it on a podcast. We're at, let's say, television has just come out. We're at the stage where they're putting radio shows on television, like right at the
Good
beginning.
one.
Like it's like super early. So therefore, it is more of a collaboration. It's like, well, how can we change our data or update our data to get the best AI outputs? How can we update our prompts? How can we update our systems? Especially in real estate, it's one of those industries where, like I sat at a round table last week where people were talking about centralizing data, but that's a conversation that happened 10 years ago. Like, we're now like, well, how do we get our data in a state where it's got the right context and it understands us, and we're going to get the best AI outputs? So the conversation's changed before people have even realized it.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I love that, putting radio shows on a TV. So I'm really looking forward to actually have TV shows on the TV stage.
Me too.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I have one last question for you before we wrap up. For all our watchers or listeners today, what's one key takeaway that they should have from this session with you?
I would give maybe two or three things, and also how we transform Alasco. First, to everyone out there, be curious. Be curious all the time. Something is happening out there. Don't be scary. Try to really find out what this means. So use chat LLMs, could be ChatGPT, Claude, whatsoever, on a daily basis. Think of personal use cases that you would potentially give to an assistant, I would say, and typically these can be done by an agent. So try out all these stuff by yourself, because it will help you understanding what's happening there, and you have to try it out. It's not a black box; it's actually very tangible. So use it, be curious. I think that's the one side, and the second side, would, at least from when it comes to the industry perspective, I think when we talk about digitization, this becomes even more important when it comes to data. So I think the most important thing is to wrap up all your data points, all the context you have in one platform, because this is the basis for all the agents and solutions that add services on top. And I think these are the recommendations on a very individual but also company level I would give to everyone out there. Evan, over to you.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Yeah, be curious. The people at organizations who are going to win are the people who adopt AI quicker, understand it quicker, end up managing it quicker. Like you mentioned OpenClaw, Benedict, like earlier on. I've got one sitting on my desk on my Mac Mini that everyone in the office right now is going to be looking at me like rolling their eyes. But I've got this thing totally using a full computer, and you can extrapolate super quickly of like, okay, well, if the AI can use a computer, it can basically do my job. So if it can do my job, what am I doing? So people are going to be managing AIs. So the earlier you can adopt it and play around with these things, the better you, I think, are positioned in the age of AI. So I'd say that's probably the biggest one. And then the takeaway from me would be like, how can organizations change their data or change their data structure in an AI world? So how's data contextualized? How does it understand who you are, what your aim is at the business, where you sit in the business, and how is it going to help you in the organization achieve your goals? Because what that looks like is very different to Dave, who might sit next to you.
Thank you. So to sum it up, be curious, be fearless, use it, and try to learn from it, because nobody has the ultimate answer at the moment.
No one.
Yeah, well, that's a wrap for today. Thank you so much, Benedict, Evan, and to all our watchers. The session is recorded, will be sent over for you to review and to share, and of course with our guests' details. So thank you so much for a great session today. I learned a lot.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Evan.
Thanks, Monica, for hosting.
Bye, everyone.